Good morning, everyone. Now I can hear me. That's okay. um, this is not me trying to enrage three different groups. It's that the first time I presented this speech was in May the 4th. So, my name is Rodrigo Urubatan, and if anyone wants to contact me later for questions, you can go to my my blog sobrecódigo.com, and I will present you some ways that you can use Git for more than just code control. You'll be able to use it to verify if everyone in the company is checking, is complying to the company code standards, if all the code is being tested, and uh, you'll be able to build something like Heroku for deployment. I will show how to do that in a really easy way. So, there is a lot of things that you need to do while uh, creating software. You need to check code against the company standards, verify if the code is well formatted, because uh, otherwise everybody will start getting merge problems. You need good commit messages. You need to run tests, and sometimes your tests take a lot of time to run. So it's faster if you can just run tests in your machine for the changed files, and then in the integration server you run all the test suite. You can use Git to start integration builds. You can use it to start deployments. You can compile assets. You can run migrations and install npm modules, reload server applications, and do all kind of stuff of just learning to use Git. And my goal is to show you how to automate everything, because I'm a lazy programmer and I don't like to do things all the time, repeated things, and that's boring. So, how Git can help you do that? Uh, when you are committing something, Git can check if you are compliant to the company standards. It can help you format a good commit message so everyone knows where that commit came from and what it is doing. You can, before you push tests to the central server, it can run the tests for only for the changed files locally. It can start the integration build process. It can when you pull codes to your machine, it can bundle install and yarn install npm, install every dependency you have so you can work offline later. Because when Git started, one of the arguments to use it was, oh, now you can work offline, you don't need access to the central version server all the time. And you can't do that anymore, because when you push a version, when you pull a version to your machine, you just don't have the dependencies for your code. So Git can help you with that too. And when you start a deploy, using Git can make sure that all dependencies are already installed. I'm not sure if it happened to anyone else, but I had problems before just with an application in production, and I found out that the problem was just that npm module was missing and it was breaking one of the pages. Probably someone else already did that. And no, not all the applications and in all the companies have DevOps to make every deployment perfect. And not even DevOps do that. So this talk is mostly about using the Git hooks. Git has an amazing feature called the hooks that happen all the time when you do anything in Git. It can run a script and do something for you. If you are used to GitHub or any other server, GitLab, there are others that I don't remember right now, and they have those web hooks that do anything for you, from starting builds to letting you know that someone else pushed a version. It's just they expose it to the web, all the hooks that I will talk here. For example, to check code against the coding standards for your company, you'll just need to write a Git Precommit hook, and no one else will be able to commit anything that doesn't pass your verification. To have a good commit message, you can write a script in the prepare commit message hook, and to run the tests before pushing the code, you can just use the pre-push hook. The same thing to fire the CI build. GitHub uses the post-receive hook, and it starts the web hook that fires the integration build in whatever server you are using. And for automatic deployment, I will show you two different approaches. One that I used to start automating an application that was running for years before I got to the company, and no one has had before that heard about automating builds. And another way is building a small clone of Heroku that has a magic deployment system. So, once upon a time, I had a problem with someone that started working with me, and that guy decided that following the company standards, using the right formatting, writing tests was not a thing he wanted to do. And I talked to my boss, and this created a problem, and I had to solve it. And as a good programmer, I'm solve problems with code, and I decided that Git could help me with that. So I started working with, started building a Robocop configuration that would enforce all the company standards. And Robocop identified some problems and things that I was not taking care of yet. But after that, I added a pre-commit hook to my Git repository, and I couldn't commit anything without complying to that to that standards. And of course, you know that the Git hooks are just a local thing. If you commit anything else, it will not share all the hooks in all the copies of the repository. But this was the hook that I used. And you don't need to read out the code. This is a test for you. Don't read all the code. The only important thing is the red line that runs Rubocop against the changed files in that commit to verify if that files are still following the defined standards. And if it fails, it aborts the commit, and you need to fix it before being able to commit anything. And in a few minutes, I will show you how to work around this limitation that Git has, that the hooks are only present in your machine. You can solve that problem too, but I'll talk about that later. And another little story. Once upon a time, I found a bug in QA, and we had few features that were being tested, and each feature was developed in one branch. And after I found the commit that that generated the bug, I had to find out from which of the feature branches it was generated, so I could fix in that branch, and it would not be present when the branch was merged to production. And it's not impossible to do that with Git. Git has a lot of very cool commands, and I finally was able to identify the root cause of the problem. But it was hard, and I would not be able to remember what the sequence of commands every time I needed it. So I decided that it was a lot easier if every commit included a small piece of text telling me that this commit came from that branch. And it was kind of stupidly easy to do that with Git, writing a pre-commit format commit message hook. Just got the branch name and added it to the file, and after that, all the commits added had the branch name in brackets in the started of the commit message. And I never had the problem again of finding a bug, finding the commit that introduced the bug, and not knowing where it came from. Of course, you can do a lot more things in the formatting commit message hooks, but you don't need to. You can be. You don't need these even if you are really good in memory and can remember every Git command. So, anyone here thinks that life is too short to test before sharing your code or putting anything in production? No, that's good. This is another test for your self-control. Don't read all the code. The idea here is that we had a really big test suite that took almost 5 minutes to run, and no one wants to run a 5 minutes test suite all the time. So we decided that running tests only for the changed files would be a good idea. And I added a Git pre-merge Git before push hook that detected what files were changed before pushing that code to the server the previous time and these current changes. So with these two red pieces of code, you can identify here what files changed since the last commit, since the last push of that branch. And here, run the test files just for the changed files. There is a big problem with this script that I couldn't find a really good way to identify what files changed from what test files test the affected files. So here, if you want, I will push the samples later to my GitHub account and you can take a look at the script. I'm just matching the file name and to the tests directory and adding the rspect or test RB extension. And if some configuration file changes, you just run all the tests anyway. This improved our workflow from most of the times running a 5-minute test suite to running just 10 seconds tests and letting the integration server run everything else. I'm probably running too fast with this. So, do you remember that I told you that all the Git hooks you were writing run only in your machine? So there is no easy way to trick that evil coworker to install my Git hooks and hope that he will stop being evil and start complying with anything else. I tried developing RubyGem to install the hooks automatically. That was not possible because RubyGems don't have post-install hook or anything like that. And I found out that NPM modules have this post-install hook, and I just started writing an NPM module that copy the hooks from somewhere in your project to the Git hooks directory. And when I was almost done, I remember to just go to Google and check if someone else had already did that before. And to my surprise, I just stopped what I was doing and found out that there is really magic NPM module called Shared Git Hooks. Really cool name. If you just install it in your project and using NPM or yarn, you choose, you can add hooks to the hooks directory to your project, and it will install automatically that hooks to the Git repository next time anyone install the NPM modules on their machine so they can work. And with this, it's really easy to just share every Git hook that you developed, and it will be present in all developer machines, and really easy to use, reuse, and share. And they will be in the repository committed, and anyone can change it. Of course, after it installs, anyone can go to the Git repository on their machine and remove the hooks. The post-install hook will not run all the time, it runs only once. So it's not a perfect solution, but you can trick anyone that's not complying to the company standards to be forced to add good commit messages, use correct formatting, run tests, and they will just start blaming you for everything that they can't do anymore. So, Have you anyone heard about too much automation? Uh, Sometimes it doesn't happen only with Git. You were writing, for example, an active record model, and you add those wonderful after save, before destroy, and lots of hooks doing wonderful things that will save your time. And then you need to create a different endpoint, a different controller to create those models, and you don't need all that verifications running in your administrator interface, or administration interface, or the opposite. You don't need an email letting everyone know that the user was created when an admin creates it, but you already added it as a Git hook, as a post after save hook in the active record model. So always be aware of too much automation, and don't automate dangerous things, because when you use that shared Git hooks thing, it will not install the hooks automatically only in your developer's machine. When you install these services, the NPM module on your server, all the hooks that are supposed to run in developer machines will run also in the servers. Of course, you can add the module just for development. That's smart. But when writing hooks and sharing things that will be executed in more than one machine, or when adding active record uh, after save, before save, after destroy hooks, or anything like that, be aware that too much automation is also a problem. So, um, true story here. Earlier this year, I was going to Utah to present this exact talk, and I decided that I was not taking the day off during the travel. I was going to work in the airplane. Why not? And since Git can have all the versions there, I just decided that I was opening my notebook and Git pulled the last changes before flight, and was just keep working after the plane started the trip. And when I did that, I discovered that another developer added another Ruby gem to gems file that was needed to a feature that was merged in my code now, and we needed another two npm modules, and that flight didn't have Wi-Fi. Uh, Most don't have. Um, so I decided that it shouldn't happen again, and that Git could help me. So since I was already doing a talk about Git hooks, I just added one more hook to my repository that now I use in all the projects. Really simple hook. Git post merge hook in my machine, that all the times that I pull something new or merge a different branch, it just install all the new gems and npm modules, and it will never happen again to me. So this is a learning from my mistakes problem. And this was a last-minute change in the talk too, so just added it before talking in Hobby Hack this year. Anyone here uses continuous integration? Good. So you are good developers, and Git can help with that. But every time I start talking about continuous integration, I remember a piece of the Shrek 2 movie. Anyone saw it? Shrek 2? No. There is a really cool character called Donkey. It's really a donkey. And I think, yeah, this piece of movie. And it's something that I always feel the integration servers are doing. Are we there yet? No. Are we there yet? No, not yet. No, not yet. And this is this is boring, right? And when you are not using something that is integrated in your, let me see if I can move back. No. Yeah. Every time you use an integration server that's not continuous integration server that's not really integrated in your Git repository, in your Git server. That's what the continuous integration server is doing. It keeps asking all the time to the version control system, do you have changes? No. Do you have changes? No. And sometimes it says, yeah, and it starts a build. But I don't like someone in the back seat asking all the time if we are there yet. And Git can change that, of course. We can just tell Git to notify the build server when there are changes, and it can start building everything and running your tests. If you are using GitLab, their integration server already do that. If you are using GitHub, Travis CI uses the hook to do that. But if you are using any Git central repository with, for example, Bamboo, TeamCity, Jenkins, they are the donkey in the backseat. They just keep asking if there are changes or don't. But you can just add a post-receive hook to the Git server with a small piece of code that will notify your build server. Of course, for each integration server, there is a different code that you need to run. I have some snippets here. If you are using Jenkins, you can add a post-receive hook with a curl doing a post notifying Jenkins to start building. You need your username, and you need to go to the administration interface of your Jenkins server to get API token for that user to use in the URL. And of course, you need your Git server to be able to access the Jenkins server. If you are using Travis CI with GitHub, you don't need this. But if you are hosting your project in other server, in your company server. For example, when I was working at HP Labs here in Brazil, we started using Git because I convinced everyone that it was a really good tool, but they had some internal policies, and the source code had to be stored inside the company. You were not able at the time to use any public service, any service that you could pay for to get your sources online. So we had to use the Git server inside the company. We just set up an SSH with keys for every developer, and it was not that hard. But in that case, if you have a similar problem, you'll need to also use curl to start your Travis CI build using this code. In the request, you'll need to say which branch will build, and you need to get an authorization token from your account for Travis CI. For TeamCity, anyone else here uses IntelliJ tools? I really like IDEA since the times I worked with Java. No? So I like IntelliJ. I'm pay for it every year, and they have a really cool build tool called TeamCity. And they had the worst API for these samples, because this is the only one that you need to put your password there, and it's ugly. So TeamCity has a really good interface, but the API requiring you to add the password in the URL is simply not good. And you need to post an XML that is only used by someone that is used to work with Java. No one else uses XML anymore. For Bamboo, you also need to post the password there. It's also not cool. And I don't think I ever used Bamboo. But no, I used it when I was working with Java a long time ago. And it had another name at the time, but it's the same software. So this is how you can use, just with a post-receive hook, you can let Git know, warn the integration server how it needs to start a build. So you don't have the donkey in the backseat problem. Deployments. In the perfect project, working with Rails, that it's my everyday work, you could use something like Capistrano to run the deployments and configure machines, but it's not always possible. And sometimes you arrive in the company, start working there, and no one else in the company heard about automated deployments. The deployment is executed exactly by some developer connecting to the server through SSH, doing git pull, remembering to install any new gems, remembering to run the database migrations, remembering to install any new npm modules, and not remembering to compile the assets, uh, all this manually, hoping nothing goes wrong because that process never happened anywhere else. And if you remember to do all that and simply forget to reload the server, it was just everything for not all for nothing. And but Git can also help you with that scenario. Uh, I will have I will show you two different deployment scenarios. The first one is how to create a simple version of Heroku. Anyone here use it or heard about Heroku? Cool. Heroku helps you deploy Ruby, Node, and Python applications with a really easy way. My goal to here was in a new application we were creating to be able to just add a new Git remote to the repository on my machine, Git push the master branch to production, and that should deploy my application without problems, like you do with Heroku. To do that, while creating the new server, I created a directory called myapp.git and initialized it with a bare Git repository that's exactly the same as any Git repository, but without the checked out files. And edited the post receive hook with a simple code that you don't need to read because I described it just before. It do exactly all the steps that I mentioned before, with the exception that it identifies what branch was pushed there, so you can deploy any new branch to that server. It will change to the deployment director of the application. It will fetch the last changes, clean check out the branch you just pushed, do a git pull, install the npm modules, bundle install, migrate your code, compile your assets, and just touch the tmp/restart.txt. So your code is live. Just every time you git push to that server, the deployment will run for you. From this script, I derived the solution for my problem with that old server in the machine. I just added a post merge hook, and after we still need to SSH to that machine because after 4 years we will be retiring that server in the next month. It's still running and I don't want to touch that application. So I just automated the deployment to prevent someone from forgetting any of the manual steps. Now, if you just SSH there and git pull, it will run the bundle install, yarn install, migrate the database, compile assets, and restart the application. The interesting thing here is that when you do a git pull, the hook that will run is the post merge hook because the git pull merges the changes from the server to your local repository. So when you are not using Capistrano or any other deployment management tool that do real deploy tracking. Sometimes you feel the need to uh, be able to roll back to a previous deployment or just make sure you know what version was exactly deployed. And of course, you can just git tag the version before every deploy. But sometimes you just like using tools that do that for you. And I found out that there is uh, Git Deploy command that you can add to your Git tools. And after testing it, I found out that the name is there to trick you. It don't deploy anything. This git deploy command do the tagging and controls tagging and merging for deployment. When you do git deploy start, it will create a tag. It will tell you to merge all the features that you wanna deploy to that branch. Then you do a git deploy sync that will push all the changes to the server. And git deploy finish will make sure you have a branch ready for deployment. So with this, this is a really not smart version of git tag production slash when you do the deploy. But of course, the perfect way would be to use a tool built for that, like Capistrano or any other thing. Now I'm changing the approach to use Docker for deployment, so this is even easier. There is container deployed every time you need a new deploy, and you can just go back to the previous container. So I know that we don't have questions here, so I just switch here. And if you want to ask anything about the talk or talk with me about anything else, we can talk about it later in the hall. If you want to send me questions, you can reach me at Twitter, GitHub, or check my blog. And I have now weekly, I'm starting a weekly newsletter with tips and tricks about Ruby and Rails development. If you want to sign up with that, just go to this address. So thank you very much.